Mosquito, also known as Chris. Welcome to the shop. This, clearly a snack bowl. This, I don't know what that is, but I'll show you how to make both of them. To get things started off, what we're doing here is I've got that timer running up in the corner, and that is real time for the video. And I'll explain that in a little bit, but what I'm doing here is I'm putting a hole for a worm screw that I'm going to put in the chuck right in, I guess, sort of the middle of the blank. This one was fairly well balanced, so it was pretty good, but I'm just going to go ahead and get that going and start turning that one down. The whole idea behind that timer is it's sped up 5 times just like the video is sped up 5 times, and all of these angles are synced. Basically, that's going to be a real-time run of how long I spend doing this, because that was kind of fun last time. First thing I'm going to start out with, probably should have done this before I put everything away last time, but I'm going to sharpen, and I use a Wolverine jig and some CBN wheels, and that makes that pretty easy. Here I'm setting up, and I'm just going to sort of try to round it out a little bit, I guess. Get some of the wings of that log or that half log out of there. And I don't really need to use the tailstock here, but I like to. I've never had anything come off the lathe with the tailstock. You know, belt and suspenders and whatnot. So anyway, I'm just working on those wings and trying to sort of flatten out the bottom a little bit, because I plan on using a recess for the chuck jaws so that I can expand in with the chuck jaws, and so I need to get this reasonably flat, and also need to get in far enough that not only is there enough room to make that recess for the chuck, but also I prefer to have that in more of the heartwood if I can, rather than some of that softwood in the sapwood. I should also mention that this is some Russian olive that came from some family friends. I guess it was downed for about a year. It was blown over in a storm, not cut down, so it's still very wet. So now I'm kind of into the heartwood here, and I'm gonna just flatten out the bottom, and that was right about then that I realized I found the hole for my worm screw. Yep, that's what that, I don't know what this thing was in the intro. It was that little whoopsie. What we're going to do is we are going to start that over and try again. Like I said earlier, this was some Russian olive from some family friends, and I recently got it and cut a whole bunch of it up. It's all branch wood, and it's all stashed above the lathe. This one is a little bit taller piece, and so we'll see what we can do with this one. Drill that hole a little bit shallower this time, and we're going to make sure that that's not a problem the second time, because fool me once and twice and 3 times anyway. Back with the same setup: tailstock, worm screw, chuck, tools. Same process as before. We're just gonna knock off those corners and sort of see where we're at, and then start to work in the bowl shape. Here I'm just sort of flattening the top rim of the bowl, or what will be the top rim, just to kind of see where my final shape is going to end. Just make sure that I can get through any of the rough cut from the chainsaw, and then go back to shaping the bottom. I'm going to put a recess in this one as well, so I've removed the tailstock, and I'm going to flatten out the bottom, get a good shape to that, and then I'm going to mark out and cut the recess for that. So I have whatever they call it, the Nova dovetail chisel thing. It has markings on it for both the 50 and the 100 millimeter jaws, and so I use that to mark it out to figure out where I needed to be. I'm using the 50 millimeter jaws, and then I'm just going to kind of hollow this out a little bit. I leave kind of a domed bottom just so I don't have to remove quite as much wood. And then I don't know if you're supposed to, but I sharpened my Nova dovetail chisel, or whatever they call it, and I use it as a scraper because it's perfect for that. Once it's sharpened up, I can just sort of rough in my dovetail there and then use that to make sure that it's at the right angle and that I don't end up making it too deep. Once that was there, I'm switching to more of an Ellsworth grind. I'm trying to do that just because it's nice to kind of have options, and the main goal of this particular shaping was that I was going to come in and use this to do the shear scraping, and I much prefer the Ellsworth grind for the shear scraping if I'm going to do that with a bowl gouge, just because it's got longer wings. So here I'm doing that just to sort of smooth things out a little bit, get rid of any little bumps from not being perfectly smooth with making that cut. I'm really liking the shape of this. I like the kind of smaller base with the bulging sides and then kind of recurves back into the top. Happy with the shape. Now I'm going to be sanding, so grabbing some sandpaper and just going to town with that. Once that was sanded up, I'm just using some white Scotch-Brite pad, and this is tried and true original wood finish. So it's a food safe finish, and I'm just applying that to the outside with the white Scotch-Brite pad, and then let that soak in a bit, and then apply another coat or whatever if it needs it. If not, then I'll just go straight to buffing. But after that, I will come back in with a rag and buff it out. This is also a good time to be, keeping up on the maintenance of your tools, as long as you're waiting for your finish to soak in for a little bit or dry. Take my time and sharpen. After I finished sharpening and then I buffed that, we're going to take it off of the worm screw, and we're going to take that worm screw out of the chuck, and then we are putting this on the chuck, so now we can hollow out the inside of it. Going back to that 40/40 grind push cut, and we're just going to start working away. First thing I usually try to do is I flatten out the top, which isn't completely necessary because you're going to be hollowing out most of it anyway, but I like doing that. Maybe it's just me, but it feels like I can hollow a lot better that way because I don't have to worry about like the bumps and the skipping of cuts and all that kind of stuff when I'm trying to get that in. Anyway, here I just kind of going in a little bit at a time, usually around 1/2 inch or so, and I was finding that it was getting hard to round the corner of the bottom on the smaller bowl, so I'm not actually sharpening, I'm just relieving the bottom corner of that bevel so that I can try to sweep into that corner a little bit easier with this tool and keep kind of cutting without having to just freehand on the very, very end of the tool. Here I switch to a smaller gouge and see if I can round that corner. And I thought, well, maybe I will try the Ellsworth grind, which is also a smaller tool. I think it's a 3/8 inch bowl gouge. And, well, it was working-ish, but I also have this carbide tool. I can never remember what it's called. Hunter tools or something. Anyway, it's not a carbide scraper because the way that the carbide is shaped, it's like a bevel, but you use it like a scraper. So it'll throw some shavings, and I'm not that good at it. I'm gonna have to see if they have a bigger diameter carbide than the one that I have, and I think they do, because I think that might help a little bit. It's a little bit hard for me to control. Here I'm just kind of measuring the thickness of the bottom, make sure that I don't punch a hole in it. We've already done that today. We don't need to do that again. So I'm just trying to use that carbide tool to see if I can sort of get that corner transition to be something that I like and get that bottom thinned out to somewhere that's good. Bowl, it's a little bit too small for my angle sander here, so I'm And it's working well for the bottom, but it's not working so well for the sides. I'm struggling to get in there a little bit, so I try a different size. I try a big one, see if I can get just the edge of the pad in there, and that wasn't really working. So then I try a smaller size, and then that kind of works, but not very well. So finally decided to do what I probably should have done at the beginning, and I'm just gonna use my negative rake scraper and I will just scrape it. And when I started scraping, I realized yet another tool that I need to sharpen. And well, this one's a bit more of a pain because you got two different bevels, one for the top, one for the bottom, and I've got to set up the platform for that. So did all that messing around and then came back, and that's much better. That is much better. Anyway, I should have done that in the first place because that was a lot quicker. I was just worried that I was going to get some tear out because of the wet wood and trying to scrape on the end grain sides. Back to the little tiny sanding pad, that little, I think it's a 1-inch diameter, and well, good enough, I guess, for what I was going to be able to get. And I just resorted to hand sanding everything else because I can actually get in there a lot better. So just kind of progress through the grits, and then we will reconvene once I get that done. Well, that soaks in. Last time I was sharpening. This time we are going to start working on the mountain of mess. At least the thing that I like about turning green wood is that at least the shavings are big. Anyway, always trying to make progress even while I'm waiting, because that's a little bit less that I have to do later. Lots of work. So once that finish soaked in and it didn't look like I needed to add any more, I've got my cotton rag here and I'm just buffing that out on the lathe. And I'm obviously not trying to buff it out to a complete shine. I'm just trying to make sure that everything is nice and even and that any excess oil and wax is wiped off and not going to become gummy in the future. So there you have it. It was at about hour and 45 minutes, hour and 46 minutes, something like that. Certainly could have been faster. I was doing a little bit of messing around, and I mean, that also included a bunch of cleanup time and some sharpening and all that. So, if I was better prepared, I'm sure I could have gone a little bit faster, but that wasn't the point. Just a little bit more about the shape. So the shape I was talking about, it kind of starts to flare out and then curves back in. And I like the outside shape of that, but more importantly, and the reason why I like that shape for this is because this was intended to be a snack bowl, or, I use it for Chex Mix. You might use it for peanuts or M&Ms or who knows what else you might put in there. But the thing that I like about the design that curves back in is the inside follows that same curve. So the inside curves back in, which when you're getting snacks out is a lot easier because you can just take a scoop and it kind of just puts it into your hand rather than having to try to slide it off the edge when it goes off out to the side. So that's just a little bit more about that shape and what I like about it. Anyway, I appreciate those of you that stuck around this far, and I would definitely like it if you hit the subscribe button, and I will catch you in the next one. Also, it totally wasn't my intention to eat all of these for filming. I was going to dump them back in the bag. I like Chex Mix.